is Meg Ozaki Graves, and I'm the education coordinator at Central City Opera.
Awesome.
I saw you in the production of Magic Flute.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You look
And
familiar. Were you? Yeah,
yes,
you were there.
yeah, I was Josh South's chorus partner in the Pagliacci that you did at Colorado.
That's what I thought. Yes. I was
Mhm.
like, okay, that's right.
Yeah, so it's nice to see you again.
Lifetime ago. Yeah.
I
Seems like a
know
lifetime ago. Yeah.
it was just what, February, but it feels like much
Yep.
longer ago now.
Hmm.
Yeah, but my history with Central City Opera, I have been performing with them as a touring artist for about 6 years, and then last summer they did a production of Madama Butterfly,
Hmm.
and Alison Moritz was directing that production and very sensitively and sensibly requested a cultural consultant for the production.
Hmm.
And in my other life, outside of opera, I've worked in Japanese classical music and a lot of the traditional art forms of geisha, although I'm not trained in that. Um,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
I was able to um, sit in on rehearsals and be there
Hmm.
for the singers and provide a resource
Hmm.
from an internal perspective there. So
Hmm.
yeah, we're in very
Yeah.
interesting times right now. So how are you?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. I'm hanging in there, as most people, lead with. It's true. Like it's a day by day thing. Some days are up, some days are down. Um, I try and, keep myself busy. And well, now I am, when this first hit, I think a lot of us are just kind of walking around depressed and sad, and like, just there's so many questions. And then still there's so much uncertainty in the world and what we're going through. But I'm okay. I've in terms of, it's sad to see. I mean, it's good and bad. Like, on the good end, it's good with all this um, protests that we're seeing for change. It's sparked such a huge um, just I've never seen a response like this, that people they're calling to action, and calling for change, and just it's quite it's great. But on the other hand, like, and there's still so many stories out there of people getting gunned down, racially motivated things, and um, it is very disturbing and sad to see. It seems like we're about to make progress, but then we're always, there's always some setback. Um, but I'm choosing to stay positive uh, throughout all this, and just keep it going day at a time. That mentality. Yeah.
That's great to keep a positive
Trying.
perspective as much as possible. And it's not possible
Yeah.
all of the time, and that's
Mhm.
okay, I think.
Right.
Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
I think what we're doing right now is one of the positive outcomes of some of this challenge, right? Having conversations, and from my perspective, I'm really interested in
Mhm.
working towards actionable change. So can
Mhm.
you tell me a little bit about what it has been like to be a Black man working in the opera industry today, and what sort of changes you
Mhm.
anticipate or hope to see
Mhm.
in your world?
Hmm. It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, in a general sense, like, and I've said this before, these things are happening now aren't anything new, sadly. And, I can, speak for every Black artist that, like, we've lived in this skin since we were born. So, I grew up in Virginia. We were affected by Jim Crow laws, and so the southern states in particular, there's lots of history with racial tensions and, you know, just growing up and experiencing being racially profiled and targeted has just always been a part of my life. And it's something I mean, it's just something you do get used to. I mean, it's sad, but it's true. And you kind of, my mom always, you know, tells me like, okay, if you ever get pulled over by the cops, like these are the things to do, you know, hands on the steering wheel. Don't, you know, make any sudden movements. Don't go for your glove compartment and grab anything unless he tells you to do so. Like things that we already, you know, that we grew up with and certain ways to handle situations, you know, being a Black man and making sure that, you know, we stay safe when we are, you know, dealing with those types of confrontations. And I remember like getting, and I've told this story before, but I remember I was in a mall in Norfolk, and I was going through some records. I was on my own, and a group of Black kids that walked in maybe 10 minutes after me, and there was some dispute or something happened with the manager, and they got kicked out of the whole mall. I don't know what happened, but then the security guard turned around and kicked me out as well. And I wasn't involved in the dispute. I didn't know any of those kids. I think I had, you know, just cornrowed my hair too. And he just looked at me and just in his mind decided that I was guilty and I was in there to cause trouble. And I got escorted out of the mall, and I hadn't done anything wrong. And there's just those types of things like growing up with that, you know, just stick with you and you learn to live with it. So, you know, fast forwarding to my career, being a Black man and singing, it's very much, it's a lot more of like my outside experiences, like when I'm on a gig and like I was in Dallas for show, I was doing Chouinard, and I went for a run in a nice part of town. When I go to these places, you know, you're coming in, you know, not having been there before, so you're not familiar with things. So it's kind of, you know, you got to scope places out. But I remember I just found like a nice path, and I ran through this nice neighborhood, and I saw a cop car pull up past me and then stop, and I ran, and he waited there, and then a second car drove past him and then like veered off and made a left. So like I just, you know, this happens like, you know, going on gigs, going to different cities, and just like the experiences of living in this skin off stage, or where I, you know, and that's just like everyday life. In terms of the opera world, I mean, I would say, you know, I think that there can be change, of course, just as much as on the stage. As, you know, I think the people pulling the strings, like behind the scenes, I think we can have more inclusion for sure. You know, I've learned to just be in charge of the things I have control over when it comes to casting. If someone, you know, looks at me and they just can't wrap around in their brain or have enough brain power to see and look past like what I look like and can, you know, visualize me in a leading role in a lot of these Eurocentric operas, you know, that's something that's out of my hands. All I can do is just be the best artist that I can be, and, you know, give all I have to give and work on the things that I can improve upon. And the rest is, you know, I've always kind of approached my auditions that way, because we can't see what goes on behind closed doors, but we do see what comes out on stage, you know, like, and the people who get cast. And you know, being a baritone especially, I don't really see much of that, you know, much of the inclusion in casting, especially for leading man roles. Side roles, sure, like Mercutio, you know, even, I mean, for me, I have like kind of two challenges. I'm black and I'm also short. So like it's like a double challenge in that way. But even still, you know, point me a black baritone who's done on Eugene Onegin on the biggest stages, or Valentin or Belcore or Vodcek. Like you probably can't. I mean, it's just, you know, in those types of leading roles, I haven't, you know, seen any black folks in those roles, black men. And there are a lot of great black baritone singers. And, you know, my mentality being a black man and singing is you just gotta sing your ass off. Because if you don't, you know, I just always had that mentality of like, you just have to be perfect and just be an extra step better than everybody else. Because when you do get that opportunity, you know, you can't fail, and you're representing all of the black artists, you know, wherever you go. So I've always had that mentality of just, you know, every audition has to be great. Every show has to be good. Like, and it can't be just average. It has to be like the best possible thing I can give. Just because those opportunities, I feel like, like if I mess up and fail, then that's, you know, that's that. And yeah, it's just, I think that's a kind of a longer answer, just going from my experiences off stage and on stage, as a black man in this world. And, you know, I want to see change. I want to see that show up. And like when we see these season announcements and more of representation, and it's not just to say like you need to put someone in the show just because they are a person of color, but it's the fact that we have so many great singers of color out there. We're just not like on the stages like we should be. And something that's also not Porgy Best too, you know, which is, you know, there's so many people have so many different feelings about the show, but I think, you know, there are lots of things that we can sing. Yeah, then we've got work to do on that front. But on the positive side, it is good to see that companies are realizing that, and there are companies that are making change. And, you know, even with new works, for example, we're seeing more stories about people of color, and just telling different stories and bringing in different audiences. So in that way, you know, we are like, it's not like things aren't happening, that they are. But, you know, just like with the racial tensions in this country and like how we're trying to push forward change, just like in the arts world, like more can be done. You know, this battle hasn't been won yet. You know, we just have to keep striving, keep these conversations going, and finding ways to be the change we want to see.
Yeah, I think that you are working hard to do that. I find your performances to be very exciting and compelling.
Oh, thank you.
And I know that it's no Onegin, which I would love to hear you in at some point, by the way. I was enjoying the Russian on your album.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Obviously, you played Papageno in the 2018 production of the Magic Flute at Central City Opera, which I thought was delightful for a lot of reasons, but particularly your performance was just captivating, and I liked Papageno more than I ever have.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I know that you had you know, a historical premiere as Papageno at the Met this past season as well.
Yeah.
The first Black baritone to sing the role in about 100 years and 450 performances of the show. You know, it's not a heroic leading baritone role, but I think that deserves credit where credit is due.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I was looking at a quote that I think that you had that was published in Opera Wire, and you were talking about using the opportunity to influence and empower the younger wave of Black singers, and how you have been influenced by the Black singers who came before you. So
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could share a little bit about, you know, who influenced you of the Black singers who came before, and what sort of advice you might have for this new wave of Black singers coming up, or if you would like to share with our audience maybe some of who those singers
Yeah,
are,
yeah.
who they likely don't know.
No, that's a great question. And yeah, just to clarify, like the things that I have done in my career thus far, like I'm very grateful for the opportunities I have gotten to be, you know, leading roles and doing like Figaro, Papageno, Shonards, because, you know, that in and of itself is making that change and helping break that barrier to lead to, you know, those, you know, other leading roles like Yegan and those things, and really just continuing to push forward. So that's definitely not to discount the things that I've done. So I'm really thankful for all the things that I've accomplished in my career thus far and like where it's led me, and for those experiences. But to answer your question, yeah, when I started out singing, I was influenced by Lawrence Brownlee. At the time, I saw when YouTube became a thing, and people start posting, you know, classical videos on those on YouTube. I remember one of the first things I saw him was a spiritual he did, or maybe it was either a spiritual or I think it was Rossini. I think it was a Rossini thing he was singing, and I was just blown away. Just first of all, just by his talent, not even the fact that he's Black and short like me, but just like this I mean, just as a person, this man can sing his face off. And just to add to the fact that he also happens to be Black and is on the stage in these leading roles, gave me the hope and saying like, okay, if I work hard enough and do the work and put in the time, that I also could have that opportunity to do what he's doing. Because it was there, like the proof is there. He was on the stage. He got hired to do this role. The company knew like here's like a Black man that we're gonna hire to sing this role on our stage. And me seeing that gives me like, okay, this is possible. That sense. And so in that same way, like having the opportunity to do Papageno at the Met, was kind of like a nerve-wracking thing in a way of just like what I was saying earlier about like, this is my shot to not just for myself, is like bigger than me, like in terms of, being the first one to play that role, and such an iconic role and a fun role, but to do it really well and to the best of my abilities, and to also hopefully using that platform. So like that kid who was once me, can see me and then say like, oh man, like opera is really cool. And like this guy is on the stage, doing it, running around. And like, I could do that too. So that's, having those opportunities and being able to use the platforms that I've had so far and the stages that I have been able to perform at have been a blessing, because every time that I am able to know that there's a chance that someone might be out there that's in the audience, that might be affected and see someone on stage that looks like them, is a very moving thing. And that's just what I want to continue to do, being satisfied with that, but also still pushing the boundaries and still pushing companies and encouraging and challenging these companies to just keep this conversation going and keeping you know, the inclusion and the diversity, like these are important things. And we have the artists, you know, there's so many talented artists of color, Latino, Japanese, Chinese, Black, like we can sing, you know, like it's just, you know, having the platform, and, you know, it's the people behind the scenes that make these decisions. And so we can definitely keep it going and make the arts world a better place, you know, on the other side of this pandemic. And yeah.
So I also heard that the very first opera that you performed was the Magic Flute. Is that correct?
Yes, it was. Yeah, I was at Governor School. So Governor School, and people that know me like know this story, but for those who don't, like, you know, always Governor School is where I always credit my interest in opera, because I did that in high school, and that was I did the voice program. They had musical theater and dance, and the voice was like all opera. Like, no, I went in not really knowing what I was getting myself into. And at this crazy school, crazy in a good way, love you, Governor School, we were performing like fully staged operas as high schoolers. Like we had the Queen of the Night, Susanna. For our like, we did Flute, we did Figaro, I did Fledermaus, Ballad of Baby Doe. Shout out to Colorado. I know you guys love that show. Yeah, I did Horace Tabor when I was 17. But going back to that, my first opera was Flute, and I was a bass back then. I don't know what you call a 13-year-old voice that just sings low. They cast me as Zarastro, and that was my first operatic role. And I still have it's the same score that I use of like all my highlighted parts of Zarastro. I didn't have to put in any translation because we just used we did the English Shermer version. So, but yeah, that was my first one, Zarastro. Triumphant. No, kidding. But it was, I mean, that's why I appreciate my time at Governor School, because you know, on a high school state or at a high school level, how can you like come out with like 4 or 5 fully performed roles before you even get to college, you know? So that was a really big thing for me, was doing Governor School, and having those opportunities to perform at such an early age. Yeah.
That's excellent. Going into some more of your training, I know that you were in the Ryan Center at Lyric Opera of Chicago, and then kind of as you were emerging, you premiered the role of Dizzy Gillespie in Charlie Parker's Yardbird at Opera Philadelphia,
Yeah.
correct? And performed it around, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
And you have this balance between performing traditional and a lot of contemporary work. So I was wondering if you, you know, if you could talk a little bit about your educational experiences in opera training, and then perhaps also talk about, you know, some of the contemporary pieces that you've done, and if you have a recommendation of something that our Central City Opera viewers can check out.
Or so a recommendation of a show?
Contemporary opera. It doesn't necessarily have to be a complete show, but you know, a story that interests you, or if you have some footage that they could check out online during this time where there's not much live performance happening.
Actually, well, I'll put a plug in for my concert in a minute, but I forgot I didn't answer. So to finish answering your question, the advice is kind of the advice I would have to give to young Black singers that are coming up, kind of goes hand in hand with like the education, is no matter what, always never stop doing the work. You always are a student. And I guess this is just general advice, but specifically, when it comes to getting into that room for auditions and you look across and you really, 9 times out of 10, you don't see anyone that looks like you looking back. It's always kind of it's not uncomfortable. It's just sometimes you feel like the cards are stacked against you before you even have opened up your mouth. And it's like you're proving something, just be yourself, and it's cliche, but be comfortable in your skin and be comfortable with what you have to say, and take ownership of that, and always keep doing the work and be in control over the things that you have control over. So whether that's you need help with your German diction, or this one passage, like the high note doesn't sound quite as bloomy as it did, like fix these things, constantly keep working to make yourself a better artist, and just the work really never stops. So I guess that's my main advice, which ties into the education, because that's the big part. I always joke around like people not having their music learned, but it's like that's a big part of it, is the musicianship. My teacher Robert Brown at Governor School, well, the late Robert Brown, he passed away, and he was like a musical father to all of us. Was huge on that. This man would flip tables if you did not have his music learned. So like, you do not play around. And I remember like I had slacked off. He gave me some art song to learn, and I hadn't learned it because with Governor School you had to do 2 schools too. So I had my public school work and Governor School work, and like oftentimes like when you get busy, it's just like I'll do this. You can just teach me this art song. And boy, he just went. I hear him like this little 14-year-old kid just terrified, but he did those things and instilled these things in me. Like when you're a professional and you walk into a gig, doesn't matter how busy your schedule is. People don't care if you had to go, if your car broke down and I lost my score, and then this, like, no one is interested in your excuses. Come day one of music rehearsals, even if you learned it, I'll admit, like, I learned music last minute, but it's always learned. Like, I have it memorized, and I've done the things I need to do to get myself ready to go. No matter what, that day one, it needs the music, the translations, all of that preparation better be done. And that's always been my big thing with education, like using those tools that you learned in school to help serve you when you're on the road and going from gig to gig, because that's a big part of it too, is like companies take notice of these things. If you're not prepared and you are showing up not you're not knowing it, like it's that stuff gets around. So I try to be as prepared as I can, but it's not to say like you're going to get everything perfect, because I definitely don't. But just always, you got to be ready. Especially when you're covering too. I mean, there are times, that the main performer is going to be sick or not there. So if you're covering something, you best be ready to go as if you were going to sing the role from day one. And those are things I, try to live by. And as far as like the education came up with, and just how strict my music teacher was on me, and it kind of just had a long-lasting impact. In terms of things for Central City folks to see, I'm doing a virtual recital of all Black composers. And it's going to feature a world premiere that I commissioned from a dear friend of mine, Shano Peblo. We worked together in the past. I sang on his first album, like his arrangements of spirituals, which are beautiful. And he's a really gifted composer. And all of these works are going to be featured on an album that I have coming out next year. and I wanted to originally wait to do this, but in light of everything that's happening, it seems like an important time now to do this project virtually and to get it out there for people to really listen to. And it's virtual, and it's not your typical like home concert. I mean, this is actually at a venue. It's with Valhalla Media. It's a brand new organization, and they have all this high tech HD cameras and stuff like that. Will be in an actual hall. And if Central City folks are interested, please check it out. It's going to be a special time, and just a labor of love of this program. It's featuring works by Robert Owens, Margaret Bonds, Damian Sneed, who's also a great composer of now, and Sean Pueblo's new work, which is Two Black Churches. And these poems, one of the poems we had commissioned, one of the ones I found, the first one deals with the Birmingham bombing, compared with juxtaposed, or just compared with the Charleston shooting in South Carolina. And it's a beautiful, just heart-wrenching work. And I honestly, I haven't gone through it once yet without like tearing up. It's been, especially in light of everything that's happened. But we'll be premiering that, about 13 minutes long. But in the context of the whole piece, that's like the centerpiece of it. But it's going to be a program of all Black composers. And
well, that sounds like an interesting and exciting new pursuit in these coronavirus times. I know you've been pretty active on social media, and finding different ways of performing. I think that it's wonderful that you're pushing up the timeline on this album and performing these spirituals now. Do you want to talk a little bit about, your virtual activities and what you like about working and performing in this way, and what you miss about performing on the stage?
Yeah. I've done quite a few of this. I think if I ever do another one, it's going to be called Not Another Virtual Recital by Will Liverman. But it's I mean, it's nice. I mean, we always talk about how technology, people have said this before, like, we're always like glued to our phones and it takes us out of reality. But then on times like this, it is nice to be able to still find ways to connect with people, because now more than ever, you've heard this before, people need the arts, and it's just true. And finding these creative ways like virtual, the Zoom concerts and these home concerts, and still like giving people something, is better than nothing, So on that way, like when I do these virtual concerts, I'm just remembering that, someone out there has something that you have to, that you have, there's what you have to say, someone wants that. And even if it's just one person, then that's enough for me to be like, okay, may not be live, and I've done a few of these before, but I'm going to go ahead and do this because that's just how, that's my work. It's just, we touch people through performing arts and music, and the virtual aspect has given us an opportunity to do that while we're figuring out what's going on with the live stuff. But the negative thing about it, of course, is like with the live, of course you miss having the audience and that energy of the audience. And it's weird when you're performing to an empty space, but there are people watching you virtually. So that's always strange. But then, some of these things are actually quite difficult, because when you're doing a Zoom recording of something, if you mess up something, you have to go back and start all over again. And it's not like where it's live. If you mess up, then that's just, I mean, that's just part of a live performance. You don't even think about it. If I cracked a note or if I forgot words, like, people are engaged with what you're doing, those mistakes don't matter so much. But when it's virtually and digitally, you want to like make sure you get everything right because you have the opportunity to do so. So sometimes I find myself like doing a virtual take of a 3-minute piece. It'll take me an hour and a half because I said something wrong or I missed a word, or well, that's the same thing. But like, or I've messed up a note, you know, and then your voice is getting tired, you know, like, so it can be draining in that way because, you know, when you're putting these things out here digitally, they're out there forever. You know, people are going to have so much COVID content years and years after this is, you know, hopefully remember we have a vaccine and we've moved on. All of these digital things will always be here. So with that in mind, I'm always thinking like, this has to be kind of an equivalent of a recording project where you want to get it right. So in that way, it's challenging to just keep myself like, okay, this doesn't have to be perfect. Just like perform it, record it. You did your best, move on, you know. But of course, you know, I miss performing live. You know, that's what we live for, you know, getting a chance to just feel, like I said, just the energy of missing the nerves of, you know, that 3 seconds before you're about to go on stage and you look out and there's that full packed house and then that you only get that with live performance. I think those butterflies, those nerves, but it's like good nerves, you know. I mean, there can be bad nerves, but like it's just that thing that you just can't describe that only happens when you're performing live. And I really miss that. So, you know, I'm hoping that companies are, you know, of course, trying to be safe and making sure that we're safe first, but you know, we now have to just up our creativity, how we can continue to find ways to push, you know, different concerts and arts things out there, because I think that's important to keep it going in some way. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your efforts in keeping it going virtually and trying new things.
Thank you.
We're experimenting with that a little bit here at Central City Opera too. I don't know if you remember, the front of the Opera House has this balcony about halfway up the building. So we're doing some physically distanced concerts for very small groups of people live.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. That's what it's about. Like, in one way, it's good because it's forcing companies. I mean, it's not. I mean, of course, we wouldn't want this to happen to begin with, but like, if you're creating a silver lining here, it's really so much of. I have a good friend of mine who's a DJ, and we always talk about. You know, he always is talking about like the digital aspect of the arts and music, because so much of his world is producing, having things like that are there and out there forever for people to digest. And that's honestly how a lot of young folks get, you know, listen to music now. Spotify, Apple Music, you can just, on your digital device, you can just click something and there it is, and boom, you stand to reach a huge audience base when you incorporate a digital aspect to the live as well. So in one way, you know, it's making companies think differently and being like, okay, you know, we have this camera here and let's make this little scene happen and put it out there, and then like people worldwide can view and see the art that you're making, as opposed to like you just have to, I mean, to be in Central City and experience it there, it's just like it opens up your world. So in one way, like when we're on the other side of this, I hope that becomes a huge part of it too, like having, you know, recording these operas and having you know, maybe a live like digital thing, like for the second to last day of closing day, like we're going to do a big, you know, blast and have a thing of Magic Flute or Trovatore, whatever the case may be, because you stand to reach more people. So, but of course, it isn't the same as being live. But I mean, it's just another way to keep. That's just the thing too. It's just like keeping opera going forward. I think it's going to have to change with the digital age. Everything's so digital. So, and we have the Med HD, but like, I think other companies, if they have the means to invest in like really good digital equipment and start getting their own, works and operas like at HD or whatever, and have like archives and things to just have and share when it's appropriate.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I think that I have made you talk up a storm for a while now.
I know.
I wanted to let you know that I love your t-shirt.
Oh, thanks. Wasn't intent. I thought I put it on and I realized like, oh, I'm talking about like protests and racial things. Like it wasn't even intentional to have my Boys in the Hood shirt on. It's just like, I like this shirt. I love the movie. But yeah, I appreciate it. I just had a lot of coffee, so I'm like extra talkative today. Usually
Awesome.
Not as much.
That's perfect for me. I love listening. So
yeah, just edit out all the parts where I'm like not making any sense. So that's yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And
yeah,
sending you and yours support and artistic thank you for participating in this and for participating in the virtual opera community at large right now too. I know personally I'm enjoying it, and I know that there are a lot of people out there who you're filling that void for right now. So I'm looking forward to checking out your concert.